My name is Amelia Hayes, but everyone who knows me really knows me calls me Mia. I'm 29, and a few years ago I traded the predictable quiet hum of my small Ohio hometown for Portland, Oregon. I came chasing a whisper, a promise of a vibrant creative scene, a place where ideas could breathe. And for a while, especially in those early heady days of building up Artisan Collective from scratch with my older brother Ethan, it felt like I'd found exactly that. Now as a co-founder and nominally the creative director, I found myself adrift in a sea of noise at the Oregon Convention Center. The Portland Indie Craft Uprising was in full swing, a chaotic symphony of chatter, clinking ceramics, and the scent of artisanal coffee. I was deep in conversation, enthusiastically explaining the intricate shibori dyeing technique of Mrs. Albright, an elderly artisan whose work I adored, to a small, captivated group of attendees. Her delicate silk scarves dyed in a swirl of indigo, and dreams were a testament to a lifetime of skill. It's truly about capturing a moment of feeling in the fabric. I was saying, my own passion almost contagious, when a familiar shadow fell over us. Ethan. He materialized beside me, his arm draping over my shoulder with an air of practiced ownership, that camera-ready smile already dazzling the onlookers. Magnificent, isn't it? He boomed, his voice easily carrying over the din, addressing the group as if I were merely part of the display. This is precisely the vision of Artisan Collective. We discover and elevate these hidden gems. He gestured expansively towards Mrs. Albright's display, then to the broader, sleek, and somewhat impersonal Artisan Collective booth that dominated our section of the hall. He completely glossed over the months I'd spent gently coaxing Mrs. Albright, a woman initially terrified of online platforms, to trust us to share her beautiful work with a wider audience. That familiar bitter taste like unsweetened coffee rose in my throat, and I felt my own smile freeze a polite, brittle mask. The Pearl District, where the convention center stood, was a testament to Portland's blend of old and new industrial bones clad in modern aesthetics. Outside, the quintessential Portland drizzle misted the air, a soft gray curtain against which the city's vibrant, quirky heart beat. It was a Saturday afternoon in October peak season for events like this, and Artisan Collective, our online platform championing local artisans, was by all accounts riding a wave of success. But beneath the polished surface, I felt the currents shifting, pulling us away from the shore we'd originally set out for. Ethan, now in his early 30s, cut an impressive figure in his tailored suit, exuding a confident charm that drew people in like moths to a flame. He was the voice, the face, the deal-maker. I, on the other hand, preferred the quiet hum of creation, the connection with the artists, the meticulous crafting of our platform's user experience. I was the co-founder, the creative director, the one who'd breathed life into the initial concept, but increasingly I felt like a ghost in my own machine, my contributions becoming invisible ink on pages Ethan was rapidly rewriting. Later that day, during a hurried debrief in the temporary sterile-feeling office Artisan Collective had set up backstage, the dissonance grew louder. The air still hummed with the residual energy of the fair, but a chill had settled between Ethan and me. I was thinking, I began trying to sound casual, we could allocate a small percentage of our profits, maybe start a micro-grant program for emerging artists, help them with initial material costs, that sort of thing. It was an idea I'd been nurturing, something that felt true to our original mission. Ethan, scrolling through something on his phone, didn't even look up. Mia, that's quaint, but hardly financially prudent, is it? We're trying to build a premium brand, attract serious investors. Philanthropy can come later, much later. He waved a dismissive hand. Focus on the Q4 premium vendor onboarding. That's where the growth is. My stomach tightened. Premium vendors. That was his new mantra. It wasn't the first time he'd brushed aside my community-focused initiatives. A few days prior, I'd accidentally glimpsed an open file on his laptop when he'd stepped away to take a call, a detailed proposal for an exclusive partnership with a national high-end retail chain. It outlined a strategy that would inevitably sideline many of the smaller independent artisans we'd started with the very people who had trusted us, whose unique handcrafted items had built our initial reputation. My name, I'd noticed with a painful lurch, was listed under Design Personnel, tasked with brand aesthetic oversight, not co-founder, not strategic partner. A fleeting memory surfaced Ethan and I years before, huddled over a wobbly table in a tiny Southeast Portland coffee shop sketching out the first wireframes for Artisan Collective on a stack of napkins. His eyes had been bright with shared excitement then. A fair platform for every talent, Mia, he'd promised, will change how people discover art. The contrast between that earnest young man and the calculating CEO dismissing my ideas now was a chasm I was beginning to fear I couldn't cross. Feeling a knot of frustration tighten in my chest, I later found myself scrolling through social media, a mindless distraction. An ad popped up. Empower her navigating the business world as a creative woman, a workshop hosted by a local women's business collective. The keynote speaker was Anya Sharma, a name Chloe, my closest friend, had mentioned with admiration. On impulse, a tiny act of rebellion against the suffocating feeling Ethan's dismissal had left me with, I clicked register. The real blow, however, landed a week later. Ethan convened an urgent shareholder update, which, given our small circle of initial angel investors, essentially meant just him, me, and Mr. Henderson, a quiet older lawyer who represented the small group who'd given us our seed funding. Ethan, radiating confidence, presented his Artisan Collective Phase 2 strategy. It involved a significant rebranding, a shift in target demographic towards luxury consumers, and crucially, a restructuring of the company to, in his words, optimize for a Series A funding round. Slide after slide detailed a future I barely recognized. When he got to the new leadership structure, my photo was there, but my title had been subtly altered, Head of Design. No mention of co-founder, no mention of creative director. My voice trembled slightly as I interjected, Ethan, what about the existing artisan support programs, the ones I've been developing, and this restructuring? It significantly diminishes my founding equity and decision-making role. He met my gaze with an unnervingly cool expression. Mia, he said, his tone patronizingly patient, you need to understand this is a business, not a charity club. These decisions are vital for survival and growth. And frankly, the investors we're targeting want to see a more streamlined, decisive leadership. He then slid a thick, legally bound document across the polished table towards me. This formalizes the new structure. Have a read-through, sign it when you're ready. Sooner rather than later, preferably. I was stunned into silence. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, remained impassive, his gaze fixed rather uncomfortably on a point somewhere beyond Ethan's shoulder. I picked up the document, its weight a physical manifestation of the betrayal I felt. Without another word, I stood up and walked out of the room, Ethan's composed expression the last thing I saw. Driving home through the relentless Portland drizzle, the city lights blurring through my tear-filled vision, I felt a profound sense of desolation. My small Hawthorne apartment, usually a cozy sanctuary, felt cold and empty. I tossed the offending document onto my kitchen table, where it landed with a thud that echoed the sinking feeling in my heart. Then my eyes fell on my laptop screen, still open to the confirmation email for the Empower Her workshop. A tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of something other than despair sparked within me. I sat down not to read Ethan's damning proposal, but to search for Anya Sharma to understand the terms in that hateful document. A silent, hesitant rebellion was stirring. The question hung heavy in the damp Portland air. Was I going to let Ethan erase me, or was this the moment I finally found my own voice? The question, was I going to let Ethan erase me, or was this the moment I finally found my own voice, echoed in the hollows of my apartment long after the city lights had blurred into a pre-dawn gray. Sleep had been a reluctant visitor, offering only fitful snatches of rest, punctuated by replays of Ethan's dismissive tone and the cold weight of that legal document on my kitchen table. I finally dragged myself out of bed, the previous day's despair clinging to me like the damp Portland air. As I made a cup of tea, my hand shaking slightly, my gaze fell upon a small, hand-painted postcard propped on my counter. It was from Mrs. Albright, the elderly shibori artist. A tiny, exquisitely detailed ceramic bird was glued to one corner, and beneath it in her delicate, quavering script were the words, "Thank you, dear Mia. Because of you, my little birds can fly further." Tears pricked my eyes, not of sorrow this time, but from an unexpected warmth spreading through my chest. It was a fragile reminder of why I'd poured my heart into Artisan Collective in the first place. For the artists, for the connection, for the art itself, it was a stark contrast to Ethan's cold calculations. A few days later, I found myself hunched in a chair at the back of a brightly lit event space in Southeast Portland, the Empower Her workshop in full swing. I still felt small and imposter of sorts among these confident-looking women, but that lingering question had propelled me here. Anya Sharma, the keynote speaker, was a woman in her early 50s, her presence both commanding and warm. She spoke with a quiet authority about navigating the business world, about resilience. Then she said something that seemed to pierce directly through my fog of self-doubt. Sometimes being pushed to the margins is the very thing that gives you the clearest view. It's an opportunity not just to find your voice, but to build your own center. I straightened up an involuntary jolt. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, a different kind of energy, a nascent resolve stirred within me. The workshop ended, and after a moment of internal debate, my usual inclination to shrink into the background warring with this new tentative spark, I found myself approaching Anya Sharma as she was packing her notes. Chloe Chang, my best friend and a fiercely independent sustainable fashion designer, would have been proud. Chloe, with her vibrant energy and no-nonsense attitude, had been my rock for years. She, along with Marcus Mac Johnson, a thoughtful, grounded leather artisan, formed my chosen family here in Portland, the people I turned to when the world, or in this case my actual family, felt like it was crumbling. "Ms. Sharma," I began, my voice a little unsteady. "Your talk, it really resonated with me." She turned her eyes sharp yet kind, meeting mine. "I'm glad to hear that, dear. Please call me Anya." I took a deep breath, and in a rush gave her the heavily abridged version of my situation with Ethan and Artisan Collective. She listened patiently, her expression unreadable but attentive. When I finished a little breathless, she didn't offer immediate solutions or platitudes. Instead, she asked a few insightful questions about my role, my contributions, and what I truly valued. "It sounds like you're at a significant crossroads, Mia," she said finally. "If you'd like to talk more to explore what your center might look like, I offer one-on-one consultations. Think about it." She handed me her card. Later that week, I met Chloe and Mac at The Dotted Line, our favorite, a little too hip for its own good coffee shop in our neighborhood. As I recounted the details of the shareholder meeting and Ethan's ultimatum, Chloe's indignation was a fiery contrast to Mac's quiet contemplation. "That absolute jerk," Chloe seethed, slamming her mug down a little too hard, earning us a few curious glances. "Mia, you can't let him do this. You built that platform just as much as he did, if not more. We need to get you a lawyer, a shark." Mac, ever the pragmatist, stroked his beard thoughtfully. "A lawyer is a good idea, Mia. You need to understand your legal standing with Artisan Collective, your equity, your intellectual property contributions. But Chloe's right, this is outrageous. Before you fight him on his terms, though," he paused, his gaze steady, "have you thought about what you want? If Artisan Collective isn't the answer anymore, what is? Their support, their belief in me was like a balm." Ethan's calculated dismissal of my quaint community ideas had chipped away at my confidence, but sitting there with Chloe and Mac, I felt a sliver of it return. Mac's question echoed Anya's. What did I want? Who was I without Artisan Collective? The pressure from Ethan, meanwhile, hadn't let up. Daily emails flagged as urgent landed in my inbox, each a not-so-subtle reminder of the deadline to sign the new agreement. His voicemails, initially feigning concern, had sharpened into an impatient, almost condescending tone. He was systematically making changes to the Artisan Collective platform too, a new, slicker interface appearing overnight, prominently featuring larger, more commercial brands, while the smaller artisans, my artisans, were relegated to harder-to-find subpages. Several of them had already reached out to me, their messages tinged with confusion and worry. Fueled by Anya's words and my friend's support, I began to dig. I spent hours combing through old emails, early business plans, design mock-ups and strategy documents I'd authored for Artisan Collective. The evidence of my contributions, my vision was all there, a digital trail Ethan couldn't easily erase. The deadline for Ethan's agreement loomed. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was in Mac's airy workshop, the scent of leather and beeswax a comforting familiarity. I was sharing my latest anxieties with him, and a small group of the artisans who had become my staunchest supporters, Mrs. Albright among them. They'd heard the rumors, seen the platform changes, and were furious on my behalf. "He doesn't understand, does he?" Mrs. Albright said, her voice surprisingly firm. "Artisan Collective was special because of the heart you put into it, Mia, the way you cared for us." Another younger potter, whose first online sales I'd helped her navigate, added, "If you start something new, Mia, something that truly values artists, we're with you, all of us." Their words were a lifeline. Just as I was about to respond, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. The subject line was stark, "Final Notice Artisan Collective Agreement." It was from Ethan's lawyer, a formal, unyielding message stating that if the revised employment contract wasn't signed and returned within 48 hours, they would proceed under the assumption that I had voluntarily relinquished certain founding member rights as per an obscure clause they'd conveniently highlighted. It was a blatant aggressive power play. The room fell silent as I read it, the color draining from my face. The contrast was dizzying here in this sun-drenched workshop surrounded by genuine warmth and unwavering support, and there in the cold, sterile language of a legal threat was Ethan's world. For a moment the old panic threatened to swamp me. But then I looked at the faces around me. Chloe and Mac, who had just walked in, Mrs. Albright, the young potter, their expressions a mixture of concern and resolute solidarity. I wasn't alone in this. Their belief in me and the values we shared was a shield. Instead of crumbling, a new clarity, sharp and decisive, cut through my fear. I took a deep breath, the scent of leather and wood calming my racing pulse. I thanked them, my voice thick with emotion but steady. "Thank you," I said, looking at each of them. "Thank you for believing in me. I won't let you down." The moment the words left my lips, I knew what I had to do. Leaving Mac's workshop, I didn't go home to stare at Ethan's ultimatum. I pulled out my phone and dialed Anya Sharma's number. "Anya," I said when she answered, my voice surprisingly calm, imbued with a strength I hadn't realized I possessed. "It's Mia Hayes. I think I know what I want to do, and I'm going to need your help to figure out how to build it." Back in my Hawthorne apartment that evening, the threatening legal email lay unopened on my counter. Instead, I was at my laptop, a fresh document open. Across the top, I typed a title, the words appearing on the screen as if they'd been waiting there all along: Project Phoenix Vision and Initial Steps. A small, genuine smile touched my lips. The path ahead was daunting, uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just reacting. I was creating. The fight wouldn't be easy, but I had my first allies and a flicker of an idea that felt undeniably authentically mine. The ashes of Artisan Collective might still be warm, but something new was ready to rise. I walked into Anya Sharma's office the following Monday, feeling a peculiar mix of trepidation and a burgeoning, unfamiliar sense of purpose. The Project Phoenix document on my laptop was still just a title and a few scattered hopeful notes, but it felt more real, more mine than anything had in months. Her office, located in a beautifully restored brick building in downtown Portland, was a sanctuary of calm and creativity, adorned with pieces from local artists I recognized and admired. Anya greeted me with a warm smile and a steaming mug of herbal tea that smelled like ginger and possibility. "So, my Phoenix girl?" She began, her eyes crinkling kindly as she gestured for me to sit. "Tell me about this fire I hear stirring within you." Her words, devoid of pity, but full of encouragement, immediately put me at ease. The weight of Ethan's ultimatum, which had arrived via courier that morning, a stark, non-negotiable severance offer that felt more like an insult than a resolution, seemed for a moment a little less crushing. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. My small Hawthorne apartment Mac's organized chaos workshop and a quiet corner table at the dotted line became my temporary command centers, but Anya's office was where the real alchemy happened. With her strategic guidance, Project Phoenix began to take tangible shape. I envisioned it not just as a business, but as an ecosystem, a collaborative co-working space for artisans, fully equipped workshops for various crafts, and a curated retail collective where their work could shine, all built on principles of sustainability, fair profit sharing, and genuine community. Anya, with her decades of business acumen, didn't just listen. She challenged, questioned, and pushed me to think bigger, smarter. She helped me dissect market demographics in Portland, a city that prided itself on supporting local and independent creators, identify potential revenue streams, and crucially start to articulate a mission that was both ambitious and authentic. My chosen family rallied. Chloe, with her impeccable design sense and marketing savvy, began sketching out branding concepts for the Phoenix Hub, her enthusiasm infectious. Think reclaimed materials, Mia, lots of natural light, a space that breathes creativity. She'd say, her eyes sparkling. Mac, practical and resourceful, started an inventory of essential workshop equipment, scoured online marketplaces for secondhand deals, and offered his expertise in setting up a functional makerspace. They were my sounding boards, my cheerleaders, and my reality checks, all rolled into one. Ethan, of course, remained a persistent shadow. After I threw the new lawyer Anya had recommended, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright, no relation to the Shibori artist, a coincidence that initially startled me, formally rejected his paltry severance offer and submitted a counter-proposal detailing my intellectual property contributions and demanding fair valuation. His calls became less frequent but more charged. "You're being naive, Mia," he'd snarl down the phone one afternoon. "You're throwing away a perfectly good safety net for a pipe dream. You'll regret this." He refused any direct negotiation, stating curtly that his lawyers would handle her lawyer. I tried to let his words roll off me, focusing instead on the burgeoning energy of the Phoenix Hub. One of the most validating moments came when I convened a more formal meeting with the group of artisans who had offered their support. In the familiar, comforting space of Mac's workshop, I laid out my vision for the Phoenix Hub, my voice gaining confidence as I spoke. I was honest about the challenges, the uncertainties, but also about my unwavering commitment to creating something better, something for them. The response was overwhelming. They didn't just offer encouragement. They offered ideas, expertise, and even pledges of future membership. Old Mrs. Albright, her eyes shining, said, "This dear Mia feels like coming home." That evening I felt like I could fly. The legal battle with Artisan Collective, however, was a necessary draining undercurrent. Ms. Albright was a godsend, meticulously documenting my contributions from the initial platform architecture I'd designed to the community outreach strategies that had brought in our first wave of artisans. She was firm and professional, a buffer against Ethan's aggressive legal team. The true test of my resolve and the real turning point of this planning phase arrived on a gray, drizzly Portland afternoon. Ms. Albright called. "Mia," she said, her tone carefully neutral, "Artisan Collective has come back with a final offer. It's better than their first, but it's still significantly less than our valuation. It's a take-it-or-leave-it deal, and it comes with a strict non-disclosure agreement and a complete relinquishment of all claims." She paused. "They want to wipe the slate clean quickly and quietly." My heart sank. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the acknowledgement, the principle. To accept meant swallowing a bitter pill of injustice. To fight further could mean months, maybe years, tied up in costly litigation, draining resources and energy I desperately needed for the Phoenix Hub. That same afternoon, almost as if the universe was testing my focus, an email landed in my inbox. It was from the Portland Community Catalyst Fund, the small local foundation Anya had subtly steered me towards. The subject line read, "Project Phoenix, invitation to submit full proposal." Then they had reviewed my initial letter of inquiry and were officially inviting me to apply for their seed grant program. My breath caught. It wasn't a guarantee of funding, not by a long shot, but it was a door opening, a flicker of external validation for the dream I was pouring my soul into. I sat there for a long time, the two realities warring within me: Ethan's dismissive, final offer, and the Catalyst Fund's tentative invitation. I discussed it at length with Anya, who as always didn't tell me what to do, but helped me weigh the emotional and practical costs. "Sometimes, Mia," she said gently, "the best way to win a fight is to choose a different battlefield, one where you set the terms." Chloe and Mac were unequivocal. "Take what you can to get free Mia, and then show him what you're really made of with Phoenix." The artisans, when I hinted at the dilemma, echoed their sentiment, their faith in the Phoenix Hub unwavering. My counter-offer to Ethan through Ms. Albright was simple. I accepted his revised financial sum. It was enough to give me a small cushion and, more importantly, closure. But I insisted on a clause acknowledging my role as a co-founder and key contributor to Artisan Collective's initial success. It was a small point of dignity, but it mattered deeply to me. To my surprise, after a tense week of silence, they agreed. Perhaps even Ethan, in his own way, wanted this chapter closed. With that heavy weight partially lifted, I poured all my energy into the full proposal for the Portland Community Catalyst Fund. My apartment became a landscape of spreadsheets, market research printouts, architectural sketches Chloe had helped refine, and countless cups of cold coffee. Mac helped me draft realistic setup costs for the shared workshop. The artisans provided letters of support. The chapter closes with a late-night scene. Chloe, Mac, and I are huddled around my small kitchen table, surrounded by the beautiful chaos of creation. We're reviewing the final draft of the Phoenix Hub proposal before I hit send. There's a sense of exhaustion, yes, but also an undercurrent of fierce determination, of shared purpose. We were forging something new, something born from disappointment, but tempered with hope and community. The blueprint for the Phoenix was almost complete. Now the real work of building it was about to begin. Would the Catalyst Fund see the same fire in this project that I did? That was the million-dollar question hanging in the air as I finally, with a deep breath, submitted the application. The email from the Portland Community Catalyst Fund arrived on a typically gray Portland morning, a few agonizingly long weeks after I'd hit send on the Phoenix Hub proposal. I was standing in front of a cavernous, slightly dilapidated warehouse in the central East Side Industrial District, the air smelling of damp concrete, old timber, and the faint metallic tang of the nearby Willamette River. On the slightly smudged printout of Chloe's initial architectural sketches in my hand, this dusty shell was already transforming into the Phoenix Hub. Anya, Chloe, and Mac stood beside me, their breath misting in the cool air. "It's not perfect," I just said, my voice a little shaky with a mixture of hope and sheer terror at the scale of the undertaking. "But I can see the potential." Anya had smiled, that reassuring, knowing smile of hers. "Perfection is the enemy of beginnings, Mia. Potential is what we thrive on." Just then my phone buzzed. My heart leaped. "It's them," I whispered, fumbling to open the email. My eyes scanned the first line. "Dear Ms. Hayes, we are pleased to inform you." I didn't need to read further. A wave of giddy relief, so potent it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. "We got it! We got the seed grant!" Chloe shrieked and threw her arms around me. Mac let out a whoop, and even Anya's composed face broke into a wide grin. It wasn't a fortune, not by any stretch, but it was enough. Enough to sign the lease on this beautiful, forgotten space. Enough to prove that someone else believed in this crazy dream. Enough to truly begin. The following months were a blur of relentless activity, a chaotic ballet of demolition construction, and endless decision-making. The warehouse, with its high ceilings and exposed brick, had incredible bones, but transforming it into a vibrant, functional space for artists was a monumental task. My days were filled with meetings with contractors who smelled of sawdust and coffee, with city permitting officials who spoke in a language of codes and regulations. I struggled to decipher with suppliers of everything from reclaimed lumber to specialized kiln vents. I learned more about plumbing, electrical wiring, and fire safety codes than I ever thought possible. My creative director hat was often swapped for a hard hat, my design sketches for budget spreadsheets. Anya remained my steadfast mentor, her experience invaluable in navigating the treacherous waters of contracts and negotiations. She introduced me to a fantastic, no-nonsense female contractor, Maria, who not only understood our vision, but was also committed to sustainable building practices and hiring locally. Chloe, when she wasn't working on her own fashion line, became the de facto interior designer and branding manager, her mood boards covered with textures, color palettes, and mock-ups for the Phoenix Hub's visual identity. Mac, bless his practical soul, took charge of planning the workshop layouts, sourcing affordable second-hand equipment, and figuring out the logistics of shared tool access. He even roped in a few of his retired craftsman buddies to help with some of the specialized build-outs. The initial seed grant, while a massive boost, only covered a fraction of the costs. The reality of renovating an old industrial building in Portland, even with a focus on thrift and DIY, was expensive. So we launched a Kickstarter campaign. Crafting the campaign video was a project in itself. I roped in a film student friend of Chloe's, and we spent a weekend interviewing future Phoenix Hub artisans, their faces alight with hope as they talked about what this space would mean to them. I poured my heart into writing the campaign story, sharing my own journey and the vision for a truly supportive creative community. The response was astounding. Pledges came in not just from Portland, but from all over the country from people who connected with our story. Local businesses offered in-kind donations. A coffee roaster promised a high-end espresso machine for our communal cafe area. A lumberyard gave us a discount on reclaimed wood, and artists I'd never met offered pieces for our backer rewards. It was humbling and incredibly motivating. Every notification of a new backer felt like another log on the fire, making the Phoenix Hub burn brighter. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The renovation hit snags. We discovered unexpected asbestos that needed costly remediation. A crucial shipment of custom-milled shelving was delayed for weeks, and the first contractor we hired for the electrical work proved to be unreliable, forcing us to scramble to find a replacement. There were days I'd come home to my small apartment covered in dust and paint, so exhausted I could barely think, wondering if I'd bitten off more than I could chew. The weight of responsibility, to the artists, to our backers, to my team, felt immense. I rarely heard directly from Ethan, but rumors trickled through the grapevine. Artisan Collective, I heard, was struggling. Their pivot to high-end, mass-produced, artisan-like goods hadn't resonated with their original customer base, and many of the truly unique artists had quietly left the platform, some of them now tentatively pinning their hopes on the Phoenix Hub. There was a petty, vindictive part of me that felt a grim satisfaction, but mostly I just felt a sad affirmation of why I'd had to leave. At one point, a city inspector during a routine site visit asked some unusually pointed questions about our funding sources and zoning compliance questions that felt a little too specific, a little too informed. I couldn't prove anything, but a small, suspicious voice in my head wondered if Ethan was trying to throw a wrench in our works. It only made me more determined. The legal loose ends with Artisan Collective had finally been tied up. I'd signed the agreement, taken the settlement, which felt more like severance pay for years of unacknowledged work than a true valuation of my co-founding stake, and officially legally washed my hands of it. The clause acknowledging my co-founder status was a small personal victory, a line in a document that few would ever see, but it mattered to me. It was closure. The climax of this building phase wasn't a single dramatic event, but a series of small, hard-won victories culminating in a moment of near disaster. We were just 3 days away from our planned soft opening, a low-key event for our Kickstarter backers, the artisans, and our closest supporters. The space was a hive of activity. Artists were starting to set up their studio nooks. Chloe was artfully arranging locally sourced goods in the small retail area. Mac was testing the new ventilation system in the ceramics studio. Then one of Portland's infamous autumn deluges hit, a relentless driving rain that lasted for hours. Late that evening, after everyone had left, I was doing a final walkthrough when I heard it, a steady dripping. My blood ran cold. In the main co-working area, a section of the newly patched roof had given way, and water was streaming in, pooling dangerously close to a newly installed bank of electrical outlets and soaking a stack of hand-printed welcome brochures. For a moment, I just stood there, paralyzed by a wave of utter despair. After everything, after all the work, the sleepless nights, the sheer force of will it had taken to get this far, were we going to be defeated by a leaky roof? It felt like a cruel joke. I sank onto a dusty workbench, tears of frustration and exhaustion finally overflowing. Then my phone buzzed. It was Mac. "Just checking in, Mia. Everything okay for the final push?" I couldn't bring myself to lie. "Mac," I choked out, "we have a problem. A big one." What happened next was pure Portland magic, the kind of community spirit I had only dreamed the Phoenix Hub could foster. Mac was there within 20 minutes, armed with buckets and tarps. He called Chloe, who called Anya. Anya incredibly knew a roofing contractor who owed her a favor and was willing to come out for an emergency assessment even at that late hour. Word spread through our small network of founding artisans. By midnight, the leaky warehouse was filled with people. Artists I barely knew, Kickstarter backers who'd become friends, all of them bailing water-moving equipment, offering support. Someone showed up with a giant thermos of coffee and a box of voodoo donuts. The roofer, a grizzled man named Sal, arrived, took one look and declared, "It's a bad patch, but fixable for a temporary seal tonight. We'll get you through your opening." He and his crew, along with Mac and a few other handy volunteers, worked under floodlights in the pouring rain. By dawn, the leak was contained. The damaged area was a mess, but the vital equipment was safe, and the space, though damp and smelling faintly of wet tar, was usable. I looked around at the exhausted, smiling faces of my chosen family, these incredible people who had shown up for me for the Phoenix Hub without a second thought. My heart ached with a gratitude so profound it was almost painful. This wasn't just my project anymore, it was ours. The soft opening 3 days later was imperfect, chaotic, and utterly beautiful. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with sawdust and hope. Artists proudly displayed their work in their new, slightly rustic studios. Laughter echoed off the exposed brick walls. The Phoenix Hub wasn't just a building, it was alive, its heart beating in time with the community that had willed it into existence. Standing in the middle of it all, watching Chloe expertly guide a local blogger through the space, Mac demonstrating a new piece of equipment to an eager group, and Anya beaming from a quiet corner, I felt a profound sense of peace and an even more profound sense of pride. The embers had well and truly caught. The Phoenix was beginning to take flight. 6 months had passed since our chaotic, rain-soaked yet ultimately triumphant soft opening. The Phoenix Hub was no longer a dusty dream sketched on napkins or a construction site smelling of wet tar. It was a living, breathing entity thrumming with the creative energy of Portland. Today I was standing in the main gallery space, sunlight streaming through the large, formerly grimy warehouse windows now sparkling clean. I was talking to a group of eager design students from a local college, sharing the story of our improbable journey. My voice, I noticed, no longer held that tremor of self-doubt. Instead, it was filled with a quiet confidence I'd earned. "What are you most proud of about the Phoenix Hub?" One bright-eyed student asked, her notebook poised. I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that reached my eyes. "It's more than just the beautiful space or the products we sell," I told them. "It's the community. It's knowing that this is a place where artists genuinely support and uplift each other. That's the real magic." The Phoenix Hub had become a fixture in Portland's vibrant artisan scene. Our co-working studios were almost always full, the workshops buzzed with activity, from Mac's leatherworking classes to guest-led sessions on everything from sustainable textile printing to small business accounting for creatives. Our retail collective showcased an eclectic, constantly evolving collection of handcrafted goods, and Portlanders, with their appreciation for the unique and locally made, had embraced us. We weren't just a store, we were a destination, a story. Anya Sharma remained a guiding presence, now more of a cherished friend and board advisor than a formal consultant. Chloe, while still running her own successful fashion label, dedicated a significant portion of her time to curating our retail space and leading our marketing efforts, her vibrant energy, a constant source of inspiration. Mac was the heart of the workshop wing, beloved by all the resident artisans for his patient mentorship and technical wizardry. They, along with a growing core of dedicated artists who now called the Phoenix Hub their creative home, were my true partners, my chosen family in every sense of the word. The challenges hadn't magically disappeared, of course. Running a community-focused business on a tight budget was a constant juggling act. There were decisions about expansion. Should we add more studio spaces? Could we launch an online platform to complement our physical store without losing our personal touch? A larger, more established gallery had approached us about a potential partnership, a move that could bring significant exposure but also risked diluting our grassroots identity. These were the new conflicts, the welcome growing pains of a venture that was not just surviving, but thriving. Each decision was made collaboratively with input from our core team and the artists themselves, a stark contrast to the top-down edicts I'd experienced at Artisan Collective. As for Ethan and Artisan Collective, the rumors I'd heard earlier had solidified into a rather public narrative of decline. Their shift towards mass-produced, artisan-inspired luxury goods had, as I suspected, alienated their original base of both artists and customers. True artisans valued authenticity, and discerning consumers could spot the difference. I heard Ethan had gone through several rounds of staffing changes and was struggling to secure that elusive Series A funding he'd sacrificed so much for. I ran into him once unexpectedly at a citywide arts festival where the Phoenix Hub had a small, vibrant booth. He looked tired, the confident sheen I remembered now dulled by a discernible layer of stress. He was alone. We exchanged a brief, awkward nod. There was no animosity on my part, just a quiet, settled sense of having moved on. He represented a chapter of my life that was definitively closed, a path not taken that had ironically led me to a far more fulfilling one. Later I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he'd muttered something about Mia, always landing on her feet. I suppose in his own way it was as close to an acknowledgement as I was ever going to get. A few weeks before our first anniversary, a simple handwritten card arrived at the Phoenix Hub addressed to me. It was from my parents. They had been largely silent during my tumultuous exit from Artisan Collective, and the chaotic buildup of the Phoenix Hub, their communications sparse and non-committal, clearly unsure which side of the sibling feud to land on, or perhaps just hoping it would all blow over. The card was brief. It said they'd seen an article about the Phoenix Hub in a regional magazine and that they were very proud of what you've built, Amelia. No grand apologies, no deep anagnorisis, but those few words so long in coming brought an unexpected sting to my eyes. It was a small bridge, tentatively extended, and I accepted it for what it was. The true culmination of this first year, the moment that encapsulated everything we had worked for, was the Phoenix Hub's one-year anniversary celebration. We threw open our doors, transforming the entire space into a vibrant festival of art, music, and community. Hundreds of people came, our artists and their families, our Kickstarter backers, local customers, city officials who had become supporters, even the students I'd spoken to months before. The air was thick with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the buzz of genuine connection. Standing on a makeshift stage in the main gallery, looking out at the sea of smiling faces, I felt an overwhelming wave of emotion. I spoke not of the betrayals or the struggles of the past, but of the incredible journey of the past year, of the power of a shared dream of resilience, and of the profound importance of building spaces where creativity and community could flourish. I thanked Anya Chloe Mack and every single artist and supporter who had breathed life into the Phoenix Hub. The highlight of the evening, the moment that truly brought tears to my eyes, was when Lena, a young jewelry maker whom the Phoenix Hub had supported through our fledgling micro-grant program, an idea Ethan had once called quaint, stepped forward. She presented me with a stunning silver necklace she had crafted, a delicate abstract phoenix, its wings spread wide, a tiny fire-colored opal at its heart. "This is for you, Mia," she said, her voice a little choked, "and for all of us, for showing us that even from ashes, something beautiful and strong can rise." The applause was deafening, but all I could feel was the warmth of that pendant in my hand and the even greater warmth of the community surrounding me. Later that night, after the last guests had departed and a comfortable quiet had settled over the space, Anya, Chloe, Mac, and I sat in the dimly lit cafe area sharing a bottle of local wine. The remnants of the celebration were all around us. Stray streamers, a few forgotten glasses, the lingering scent of food and festivity. "You did it, Mia," Anya said softly, raising her glass. "You truly did." Chloe and Mac echoed her sentiment, their faces beaming with a pride that felt as much theirs as it was mine, and in that quiet moment I knew she was right. Success wasn't about proving Ethan wrong or about the financial bottom line, though the Phoenix Hub was thankfully holding its own. It was about this feeling of a belonging, of purpose, of having created something meaningful that nurtured not just my own spirit, but the spirits of so many others. My story for now might close on a scene like this, an early Portland morning, the kind where the mist still clings to the bridges and the city is slowly waking. I'm unlocking the front door of the Phoenix Hub, the scent of brewing coffee from our little cafe already wafting out. The space is quiet, expectant, filled with the silent promise of the creative day ahead. I take a deep breath of the cool, clean air. The scars from my past with Artisan Collective are still there. Faint lines etched into my memory, but they no longer ache. They are reminders of where I've been and of the strength I found when I thought I had none left. A phoenix doesn't just rise from the ashes, it emerges transformed, stronger, more vibrant than before. And as I step inside, ready to greet the first artists of the day, I know with a certainty that settles deep in my bones that this is not an ending. This is just the beginning of a new, more brilliant flight. Amelia Hayes didn't just build a creative space, she built a community, a living, breathing testament to what happens when you refuse to be erased, when you choose your voice over silence, your values over convenience, your heart over someone else's agenda. Mia's journey wasn't easy. She faced betrayal from family, the suffocating weight of being dismissed, and the fear of starting over. But she didn't give up. She turned heartbreak into hope, setbacks into seeds, and a crumbling warehouse into a place where artists could thrive, not as products, but as people. The Phoenix Hub isn't just a building. It's a promise that from the ashes of what others tried to take from you, you can rise, brighter, stronger, and more you than ever before. Because family isn't always who you're born to. It's the people who show up in the rain with buckets. It's the friend who sketches your dream on a napkin. It's the mentor who helps you see not just the problem, but the power in your own story. And it's the community that stands beside you and says, "We believe in you." And what about you? Have you ever been underestimated, silenced by the people you thought would lift you up? Have you ever walked away from what felt safe because deep down you knew it wasn't right? Share your story in the comments, because your voice, your moment of saying enough, might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if Amelia's journey stirred something in you, if you've ever felt the quiet courage of choosing your own path, follow this channel. Here we tell stories like Amelia's. Stories about women who rise not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Stories about community resilience and the fierce belief that your story isn't over, it's just getting started. You don't have to burn down the past to build something better, but you do have to light your own fire. And when you do, we'll be here cheering you on, sharing your journey, and reminding you your voice matters, your dreams matter, and your story, it's just taking flight.